I signed up to buy a Qualcomm Snapdragon X Dev Kit the second I found out about it. This thing is supposed to be the Mac Mini killer for Windows. They even promoted it with this amazing looking transparent shell, and I and hundreds of other devs were ready to pony up the $899 Qualcomm was asking. Their pre-order form said it would be out June 18. Well, almost exactly 1 month later, I got an email saying it was available. Great! Editor Jeff here. This week's been a roller coaster. Yesterday when I got that notification, they sold out in minutes. Today, they seem to be in stock, so I ordered one and I'll be testing it when it comes. Well, it's tomorrow now, and my order says it'll ship in 2026, so who knows? Maybe it'll come, maybe it won't. I'll pin a comment if they actually ship anytime soon. Now, the Windows Dev Kit with Qualcomm's older ARM chip is okay, but it has a lot of shortcomings. I thought surely after Microsoft's faltering start with Windows RT and then stumbling along with Windows on ARM on older Snapdragons, maybe the third time's the charm. But Jeff, you ask, why don't you just go buy one of the Copilot Plus laptops that are already out? Well, plenty of other people have, and besides paid content, reviewers haven't really been over the moon about the original marketing claims. I think the marketing push, saying basically the Snapdragon X was going to be Microsoft's M-series moment, was way overblown. It's worse than I expected, based on the marketing. Now, it's not bad, it's just not good enough. Like, when Apple released the M series, it was huge. They had all-day battery, quiet machines, an okay GPU, and it still outperformed the previous Intel machines without being plugged in. Plus, no bloated Windows install with no ads and AI crammed in, and Wendell from Level 1 Techs actually dives way deeper on this topic.
But in terms of like the developer ecosystem, it is terrible. It is absolutely terrible. I mean, we already knew it was terrible in terms of the end user experience because Microsoft has lost sight of what it means to build an operating system, but it is terrible from a developer experience.
But seriously, go check out his whole video for more on the developer community's reaction to the Snapdragon X. But this video is not just about Snapdragon X. It'd be silly to talk about that, really, since I don't even have one in hand yet.
I absolutely love those shoes. Snapdragon and Copilot Plus.
It's about what could be if Microsoft could change. I use a Mac for my day-to-day work, Linux for all my servers, and Windows for games. A lot of people are in a similar boat, or they might use Windows for day-to-day. It's not really a big deal. But I do want to see Windows evolve and succeed. For decades, it's been a pretty decent OS, but lately Microsoft's been sabotaging the whole thing with built-in ads, bloatware, and they're even doing boneheaded things like trying to remove the ability to run with a local account. And this is for something they charge money for. And then there's Windows on ARM, which was not great last time I messed with it, but I was hopeful after Microsoft threw their entire organizational weight behind the new Copilot Plus PCs, maybe Windows on ARM was gonna get better. But it hasn't, not enough at least. There still aren't hardware drivers for practically anything. There isn't a new dev kit yet, and the Windows Dev Kit 2023 never really got full support for Linux. Things like anti-cheat engines don't even run on ARM hardware, and that means students running out and buying these new laptops quickly found out that their favorite games won't even run. All that said, ARM is still awesome on Mac OS, amazing for server computing, efficiency in the cloud, and overall pretty good for Linux. In fact, I've been following Box86 and Box64's development, and it's blown me away how many games run under ARM Linux now. I have my gaming monitor plugged into this 4070 graphics card, which is plugged into this custom ARM PC. This thing has an Ampere Ultra Max CPU with 128 ARM cores. I literally downloaded Ubuntu, installed it, installed the NVIDIA drivers, and everything's working with full hardware acceleration. So far, on the Windows on ARM side, there aren't native GPU drivers, high-speed networking drivers. The driver landscape for Windows on ARM is barren. And on Linux with Proton plus Box86, I can play about as many games on this Ubuntu on ARM box as I could if I bought the latest Qualcomm laptops, except with a 4070 and full hardware accelerated ray tracing. I covered this a little last year, but the amount of work being done on Box86, Box64, FexEmu, and Proton to make Windows games run smoothly on Linux has only accelerated. Last year, my system struggled with a few games, but now I can confidently say, yes, it can run Crysis, and it runs smoothly maxed out. Ray tracing works too, like you can see here in Doom Eternal. It gets around 90 FPS in Full HD with ray tracing on, and I could max out the gaming monitor's refresh rate if I turn that off. Abduction runs now, and it's really smooth on this hardware, probably the best I've seen on any ARM PC. Forza Horizon's 4 benchmark gives us 31 FPS, which is honestly not amazing, but that's down to the CPU performance. See, the 4070 could render out 200 FPS, but the single core performance on this monster 128 core CPU is actually not that good. Like, each of the cores is only about as fast as an overclocked Raspberry Pi 5, which is less than half as fast as Apple's latest M silicon cores or even the Snapdragon X. This workstation's better for workloads where you can split up some work over tons and tons of threads. It's funny though, some software just doesn't know what to do when you throw 128 cores at it. Like, Portal 2 runs okay on some ARM boxes, but on this one, it doesn't know what to do with all that power. But a lot of older games work just fine, like Halo 3 is running at well over 144 FPS, meaning this machine runs it better than the original Xbox 360.
He was my best friend!
Even with that, I can't just blanket recommend one of these custom ARM PCs for gaming. There are multiple compatibility lists out there, like this one for Box86, but they don't give you the full picture since ARM boards aren't quite as standard yet as x86. It'll still take time for more games to run on more systems without any hassle. And like, the main developer behind Box86 has even more games running, but a few of them I couldn't get to run on here. They would just freeze on a main menu or while they were launching. And of course, that's not down to just the software. This system is a little niche. It has the highest end Ampere Ultramax server CPU, and that can cause its own problems. The cool thing is, Ampere's been expanding beyond the data center into high-end desktops like this one. They're working with firmware devs, NVIDIA, Intel, and other hardware vendors to expand support. They even worked with ASPEED to get a Windows driver out for the integrated BMC graphics on this board, and that's really what I'm after. I want Qualcomm, Ampere, Apple, really anybody to get into the space that's above an SBC on the low end and below high-end desktops. Intel and AMD have their Core and Ryzen CPUs that slot right into that realm, from desktops to enthusiast gaming rigs. Apple has the Mac Mini, but it's proprietary and still hard to use for Linux. Qualcomm, well, they're supposed to have the Snapdragon Dev Kit, but it's not really here yet. There's nothing good in the mid-range for ARM right now, but there could be. Why can't Microsoft push hardware devs to write ARM-compatible drivers for Windows on ARM? It's obvious Qualcomm's been thinking about it, but Microsoft's the one who really has to push. Linux already has a ton of driver support. Even Apple has drivers, well, for a few things. At best, the mood of those observing Windows on ARM is cautious optimism. At worst, it's a compatibility nightmare. And despite all that, what if we could install Linux on Snapdragon X? That'd help with the hardware compatibility, right? Well, people are trying that, and it's in a pretty raw state right now. But huge shout out to Lenaro, who've been working on Linux for Qualcomm for years. They've been working on Linux support for the Snapdragon X, but it's still got some issues. This video from Sharbax shows Lenaro had a lot of stuff already working, and that was just a few months ago. But it'll be a while before I trust Qualcomm to treat Linux as a first-class citizen. I'm not sure if Qualcomm's partnership with Microsoft prevents them from going all in on Linux, but the crazy thing is these laptops would probably run even better without Windows, at least from a compatibility and performance perspective. Realistically though, easy access to the back catalog of Windows-only software is a huge selling point for Microsoft, and that's probably how most people justify still paying for a license to run an OS in 2024. Contrast all that with this Ampere workstation. It runs Linux beautifully. Just download generic Ubuntu for ARM, install it like any other PC, and it works. No weird hardware support issues, no device tree stuff, it just installs and works. That's far beyond where the Snapdragon X is right now. And so I repeat what I said a couple years ago. For Microsoft, they need to find a way to expand their horizons beyond Qualcomm. Windows on ARM could be so much better, but it's being held back. It's being held back by hardware support. It's being held back by a lack of commitment on Microsoft's part, and maybe even a little bit by the fact that Intel and AMD are finally making slightly more efficient chips. And to Qualcomm, the Lenaro partnership is awesome. More Linux support, please. Maybe put together an ITX board that runs Linux on the X Elite and give us access to the PCI Express and other I/O you can offer. The hardware could be so much more useful than it is right now, burdened with Copilot Plus and Microsoft. Until next time, I'm Jeff Geerling.